So welcome everybody to the Christmas special edition of the Power Hour podcast season 1. Today we're going to be joined by Greg Savage. For those of you who don't know who Greg is, 40 years worth of experience, sits on the board of like over 15 recruitment businesses, trained thousands of recruiters, and he's just come out of a new book called Recruit the Savage Way. Thank you very much for joining us today, Greg.
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you very much.
You know, the idea of this podcast is just to any recruiter out there who wants to get any better at what they're doing, this should be a platform for them to be able to, come here and learn from people like yourself.
Performance management. So, what that is, it is laughable that people derive KPI. The problem with KPIs is not the concept of measurement. And there's no one who's good at anything in this world who doesn't measure what they do. Trust me. Because how can you get better unless you know where you are? How can you get better? But it's all about measurement.
So welcome everybody to the Christmas special edition of the Power Hour podcast season 1. Today we're going to be joined by Greg Savage. For those of you who don't know who Greg is, 40 years worth of experience, sits on the board of like over 15 recruitment businesses, trained thousands of recruiters, and he's just come out of a new book called Recruit the Savage Way. Thank you very much for joining us today, Greg.
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you very much.
Cool. Greg, I handed you a little bit on LinkedIn. Thank you very much for coming to me straight away. I was very, very chuffed when you agreed to do this. I know you're a busy man, so thanks again for that.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm that busy, Jeff, or if I'm just tired of talking about recruitment. I think it's ironic that you have me on your Christmas special when I am something of a recruitment Grinch. But anyway, I'll do my best.
Fair enough. Well, I love Christmas, so maybe somewhere we can get like that happy medium.
Yeah, no, I like Christmas, but our Christmas is a very different. Yours will be cold and in the pub, and mine will be on the beach and barbecues. So that's the difference in our hemispheres.
Yeah, for sure. I think, if you're lucky enough to have family around you, then you've cracked it at Christmas, I think, So
that's it.
Friends of family.
That is right. So that's what it's all about.
Yeah. So, Greg, if you don't mind, I've got like a few questions. I've only got a bit of period of time, so I'm going to jump straight into it if that's okay. So this is a question that it's come up quite a lot. We've asked it to other people in the podcast throughout the season, and it's just something that a couple of friends of mine were speaking about, and we just keep sort of coming to no conclusion. So I said, look, I've got this platform. Let me ask the real experts, and they'll be able to let us know. So I started in this game about 20 odd years ago, just over 20 years ago, right? And the average recruiter today bills roughly the same as what the average recruiter did 20 years ago. Why do you think that is?
Well, first of all, Jeff, I've got to question your stats. Where's the evidence for that? It sounds like you and a few mates have started been reminiscing about the old days and you got your facts wrong. I don't think that's true, actually. I'll answer your question because I think the real question is why are there so many mediocre recruiters? But actually, post-COVID, let me give you an example, which is interesting. And it's not completely opposite to what you've said, but it's evidence the other way. Prior to COVID, I'm on the board of 16 recruitment companies, so I'm very deeply involved, and that's all I do, talk to them. There'd be maybe 500 recruiters across those companies. I only knew one recruiter who was billing $1 million a year, Australian dollars. Now, it doesn't matter if it's dollars or pounds, it's a big biller. Prior to COVID, that was. And in the 2 years after COVID, I reckon there'd be 25 in those same companies. So I don't think it's correct to say that recruiters are billing less. And in fact, if you go back your 20 years roughly, in 2022, the recruitment industry worldwide was, that's only 2 years ago, or last year really, it reached sales of 650 billion American dollars. In 2009, that figure was 280. So 280 to 650 in those 20 years that you've been in the industry. So the industry's grown. So if you say that billers are earning less, then we'd have to draw the conclusion that recruitment company owners have got a huge multiple of bad billers because our industry has grown dramatically. So I'm not sure it's correct, but what you really are probably wanting me to address is why do so many recruiters not bill very much? And I think there's a few reasons. One is the competition in our industry is absolutely exploded, right? So if you go even back your 20 years or my 40 years, we thought the industry was competitive, and it was competitive, but in terms of volume of different players, so for example, at the top end, by that I mean the big recruitment companies, the top 10 in the world, the Adecos, the Hayes, all the rest of them, they have come from quite small businesses to massive conglomerates. Also, it's now quite possible for people to set up a business, as you know very well, from home. That wasn't really possible 20 years ago very easily because of the technology changes. And so there's many different competitors. The other reason is, and you're in the UK, I guess, and certainly London is perhaps one of the most transactional recruitment markets I've ever seen. It's driven by procurement. There are, and I don't mean this in an insulting way, because there's many brilliant recruiters in the UK, obviously, but it's very big, it's very transactional, and there's a lot of clients, as there are in Australia, who don't understand that making recruiters compete on price on the same job drives down quality, and that's what the industry in many cases has become. And as a result, you've got a lot of people competing on the same work for very low margin business, and that means people are working harder for less. So that's a problem. I also think to then put the spotlight on the recruitment industry rather than on the recruitment companies, I think we don't train rookies well enough. I think we've got a burn and churn, I'm generalizing obviously, but we've got a burn and churn approach to hiring and keeping recruiters. We hire rookies 3 months, 4 months, they haven't billed, and then we construct a narrative that they're no good. And we don't look at well enough, what have we done to help them succeed? It's extremely hard as somebody coming outside recruitment to just be given a couple of briefing, sort of onboarding lessons and then said, bill. And that's not true of all recruitment companies. Many have very sophisticated training, and that's great. But there still is, this one's no good, out, in with the next. And that's going to obviously bring down the average billings. One other thing, perhaps, I think that one of the key missing, I talked about training and development, but actually what managers of recruiters, and that could be like team leaders or more senior managers, one of the core competencies needs to be coaching ability. And actually, most recruitment company managers are promoted into those roles because they were good recruiters, which is dysfunctional. You can be a great leader of recruiters and also having been a great recruiter, you can, but they are totally different skills. It's like, I know you've been being English, you probably love your soccer or football. Well, as you know, the person who scores the most goals in the team is not necessarily the right individual to be the captain, right? And they're different skill sets to be a recruiter and to be a recruiter leader. And one of the competencies is coaching, which means helping people in real time get better. That's also being driven to perhaps defend recruitment owners. It's also been driven by the whole concept of remote work. I'm not against remote work, but it does come with the challenge of how do you know? People say they've done 10 phone calls today or made 3 business or that, but what's the quality? Have you heard it? Do you know what they do in an interview? Do you know how they take a job order? In most cases, we don't. Therefore, we can't provide coaching. So you asked a fairly innocent question, and you got the full Monty on my answer, Jeff. It's nuanced. I think there's more higher billers now than there've ever been in our history, but there's more mediocre recruiters, and it's not all their fault. We're very quick to put the spotlight on the recruiter and say they're no good. Some of them are no good, but a lot of them they were set up to fail because they have not been given the support to succeed.
So do you feel like anybody who has got the right motivation can be trained how to be an excellent recruiter?
No. Look, motivation is a key thing, but it's a lot more than that. The cocktail to make up a great recruiter is very diverse. We can talk about some of those things now. Firstly, and this is going to play into some of the questions I think you're going to ask me later about technology. The key, there's several, right? People love to ask the question, what's the one thing that makes you a great recruiter? There is no one thing. It's just like there's not one thing that makes you a great rugby player. There's not one thing that makes you a great parent. It's a variety of things. And with recruitment, one of them is highly sophisticated influencing skills. See, recruitment's been dumbed down. In the time that you've been in recruitment, when you first got on the desk, you were on the phone a lot, you were talking to people, you met everybody you dealt with. That's changed, and it's become highly digitalized and transactional. There is a massive danger in that for recruiters today, because what is going to happen very quickly, and is happening already, is that everything that can be done better by machines will be done and will be automated. All that then leaves is the part of the job that can only be done by humans, and that is the highly sophisticated influencing skills. And most recruiters don't have those because they've been brought up in a digital environment.
But they can be taught.
Yeah, right? I mean, sorry?
They can be taught though, right?
Some can. Some can. Some just don't have the core competency of, I mean, everyone can get better, but to be highly good at it, and influencing skills means, first of all, having the credibility to actually engage with a client or a senior candidate, any candidate. Good, sophisticated listening and questioning skills. And then advising, you know, the subtle art of pushback and having the credibility to provide insights. That's where the value in recruitment is going to come. So you need that. You need resilience, which we know about, but resilience, it doesn't mean just toughness and macho and hiding your emotions. It's actually the reverse of that. Resilience means bounce back ability, which is a word I didn't coin. It actually comes from a UK football coach. It means in the face of many disappointments, you will be able to bounce back. And in the context of recruitment, it means your next interaction with client, candidate, or colleague, they would never know that you had 3 offers turned down this morning. That's hard to take, right, in our business, because it's all or nothing business. But if you carry that wasted emotion forward for a week or 2, like a lot of recruiters do, many of recruiters are still talking about an offer that was turned down 2 weeks ago, and they're dragging forward this negativity. And real resilience means, yeah, you can show your emotion. I don't mind crying or swearing or walking around the block or whatever it takes, but it's the next interaction with a customer that it defines you as a recruiter. So there's that. There's lots of things we can talk about.
For that example, you know, like what you were mentioning, stuff that you've already mentioned, stuff about like being remote, stuff about being trained well in the right environment. I feel like it's a lot easier if you've had a bad morning, you've had 2 or 3 offers fall out, and you've got the right people around you to like G you up and get you back on the phone. Look, mate, it's going to be all right. So you've just lost 2 or 3 offers. Next time you'll get the 2 or 3 offers accepted. Right, deals will come from nowhere. The same way they'll lose, you'll drop them out. I think that's very, very helpful as well. What do you think about that?
Well, look, it's a very nuanced thing. There's no doubt that you know, I've got an example of one of my clients. Got a woman, very experienced recruiter, high biller, and she lives sort of 90 minutes, 2 hours outside of the city, and she was commuting in every day to the office. Now, obviously, things have changed, and she's got a young child, whatever. So she's now 3 or 4 days out of the office. She's highly productive. She's very self-contained, and that's wonderful for her. But she's a 15-year veteran. In the office, we actually now miss her a lot because she was the person who could put a reassuring, figurative arm around somebody when they'd had 3 offers and say, "This is going to be fine. This happened to me." We miss all that. You know, when we were coming out of COVID, it's quite interesting. There's so many examples of this. And we were allowed to come back into the office, but most recruitment companies were keeping it very flexible. I went into the office of one of my major clients. We've got 45 people sitting there normally. And there were 8 people there that day. One was the managing director, and the other 7 had less than 3 months experience. And they're sitting there. And I said to him, "What do you think these people are benefiting by sitting here with no experience around them? No coaching, no camaraderie, no feedback. They're sitting there looking at each other, trying to be recruiters, under 3 months experience in a market that was only just emerging. And we think they're benefiting from this. I'm not saying they should have sent them home, but quite the reverse. They needed some other people in the office. And he did react to that, and they changed that, because how can people possibly survive in that environment? So I agree with you. You know, there are benefits. It's logical that the world has changed, etc. But, you know, I'll be perfectly honest with you. I'm not famous for saying things people like to hear, but they're still true. Remote work and COVID and all that has led to recruitment becoming far more superficial in many cases. I was sitting in, I don't do this anymore, but a year ago I was in a training course, 40 recruiters in front of me, and I asked them, they're accounting and engineering, Jeff, right? So quite senior people. I asked them, do you interview people face to face in the office anymore? And they said, no, we used to prior to COVID. I said, what was an interview like prior to COVID? They said it was an hour in the interview room in our office. I said, what's it like now? Is it a Zoom interview? And there was a weird silence. No, there are 40 people in the room, very talkative, except not now. I said, do you use VC? Silence. I said, hey, that's not a rhetorical question. Do you interview people by VC? I was expecting a yes. They said no. I said, how? Telephone. How long is an interview? 10 minutes. So a 1 hour in the room where you can look a person in the eye, you can dig into the counter offer, you can dig into their real motivation for leaving, you can uncover by body language little worries that you can dig into. That's now a 10-minute telephone call where all they were doing was checking if what was on the resume is something that they could repeat. Totally transactional, dumbed down, and conceding the part of the job where we have an advantage over technology. So that's an example, and that has happened globally. And those same guys, well, they're obviously women as well, those same people in the room were complaining to me that candidates had got more flaky and were ghosting them. And I'm like, why do you think that is? You give them a 10-minute phone interview and you think you built up a rapport and a trust? So there is a lot of negatives. It's not, you can still have a good detailed interview with a candidate remotely. It's just that people cascade to the path of least resistance, which is doing the bare minimum. Not because they're lazy, because they want to take shortcuts and they think they can be more productive. And you've got on the client side, you've got people taking job orders. I mean, I'm not sure where you are in the world, but wherever you are in the world, just somewhere in the UK, in your city, thousands of recruiters today, and same in mine, will take job orders by having them emailed to them attached to do the job description attached to an email, and they'll start working on that job. That is the dumbest thing. If you do recruitment like that, a machine will beat you, because a machine can do that. It can read a job description and it can match candidates, and it can even forward those candidates to the client. The value is taking a job order face-to-face or verbally so that you can question, shape, advise, and create a job that's fillable in the client's interests. That's the value. And a lot of recruiters can't do that.
And that's an extremely easy process to teach somebody, isn't it? So if they can't do that at the moment, then the good news is if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh, I don't do that, hopefully there'll be someone in your office that can show you how to do that. Or I'm sure you've got lots of content online that can take people through that process, asking the right questions.
Absolutely. If the recruiter is, reasonably smart and articulate and prepared to learn, that comes back to my question on coaching. Most recruiters do that, not because they think it's a good idea. It's because they've been coached. It's because some manager has said, don't worry about that. Get resumes over there. Speed over quality. And we will lose the speed race. A machine will do that much quicker than you and I could do.
So you keep mentioning the machine, right? So I'm with you that, there's going to be a part of our, well, I don't know if I'm with you or not. From what I've heard you say, I believe that a part of our role will be taken away. But I mean, it's your opinion that matters at the moment. So how do you think AI and automation will affect the staffing and recruitment industry?
Well, it's clear that they'll affect it hugely. And we've got to remember, when we think about AI and we think about chatbots and ChatGPT, that technology is at the same stage as the motor car was in 1908, right? What I mean by that is cars have evolved a great deal since then, and so will this technology. But right now, AI in recruitment is the unfinished product. I mean, it's prone to making massive errors and it's full of bullshit. I mean, I can see the use of it, and I can see that it's going to get much more important. And I agree with you, it's going to take away all the transactional work in our business, which is going to be an interesting dynamic for recruiters who can only do transactional stuff. But I'll give you a couple of examples, right? I asked ChatGPT to tell me the difference between a temp margin and a markup. Now, anyone who's in the temporary business, well, actually, I should rephrase that. There are plenty of people in the temporary business who don't know that. But they are significantly different things. And ChatGPT gave me the wrong answer. So I wrote back and said, look, that's not right. And it said, oh, sorry, I made a mistake. And gave me the right answer. So anyone who was in recruitment and wanting to know that and was relying on that piece of technology would have gone out to their clients and got it completely wrong. So it's nowhere near sophisticated enough. And the other thing is that, and just let me just say before I go into this, because somebody listening to this may get the wrong end of the stick. I'm just pointing out that its faults and its deficiencies. I believe it will rapidly change what recruiters do, and I'll come on to that. But for the short term, it will quash creativity and it'll promote mediocrity. I mean, just look at some of the absolute bullshit that's on LinkedIn at the moment that's created by AI, and people post it. It's got no value. It's just a mishmash of stuff that's been dragged from different places. And it's actually going to make recruitment less efficient because candidates using AI now can apply for jobs in their sleep. They can set an algorithm. The AI will search for the job. It will prepare their resume. It will send it off. So they can apply for hundreds of jobs while they're asleep. That's going to make recruitment less efficient and harder for recruiters. People don't talk about this very much because they love to focus on the potential of it, and that will happen. But to come to that, I think AI will do screening, matching, finding candidates, preparing questions for interviews, preparing resumes, all that stuff it can really do to a degree and will get much better. But it's not necessarily going to improve the experience for candidates, clients, or recruiters. And that should be the guiding light of owners of recruitment companies when they implement technology. Is it going to improve the experience? The other thing is we touched on is if it does automate all these parts of our process, and I believe it will, as you said, that means recruiters' time is going to be freed up to do what is the question. And the answer is to influence, to advise, to consult, to sell in the most productive and positive sense of that word, and to increase the human experience of candidates and clients. And if you do that, your future as a recruiter is assured for the medium term anyway. Who knows what's coming after that? But a lot of recruiters are actually, a lot of owners of recruitment companies are actually resisting implementing good tech because they say that's the recruiter's job. If the tech can do it better, it's not the recruiter's job; it's the tech's job.
We had in one of the episodes, I don't think it's been aired yet. We had Holly Langley, who what she does. She was from an operations perspective. She ran businesses from an ops level, and what she does now, she goes out to businesses and she helps them to implement technology into their businesses. So obviously, AI and automation's a big part of what the discussion is around what she's got to have when she's speaking to directors. And as you say, you know, some people are just saying that they don't want it. They just don't want it. They want to be actually to be away from the crowd is actually not to use it. And other people are using it and using it in the right way, whichever the right way, you know, that you could deem it. I think that I've seen it. I've got the benefit, like you have, right? I've got the benefit of walking onto loads of different recruitment floors. I speak to recruitment founders and directors and leaders all the time, and I'm really, really lucky because I get loads and loads of information and knowledge from these people, and it's really worthwhile, right? And so I can walk into somewhere 100% certain that this is the way to do something, have a conversation with that person, come out and just realize actually that was completely wrong. And so I've learned to be extremely open-minded over these years, right? And with automation, when I first heard about it, I heard about it from my brother-in-law who's got a marketing business. He uses it loads. He uses it to hook clients in. He doesn't have candidates, obviously, in marketing, but all like that first initial stage, right? Stuff that was part of my day. And he was sort of explaining to me, this was a couple of Christmases ago now, because it was over Christmas dinner, that you don't need to be doing that stuff, Jeff. That stuff is not an adequate use of your time. And over the years, I've seen it implemented by people, automation and artificial intelligence. And I feel like it's taken away parts of the job. But what it's actually doing is, it's like what you said, it's allowing more time for people to be speaking to quality candidates, quality clients, having those more in-depth conversations, being able to show credibility, add value to the process. And, you know, it's hard to stand out over a LinkedIn message, I think, right? I'm not saying that that's a right way or a wrong way. You know, again, I'm on experience of speaking to loads of recruiters. They're my candidates, right? And I've spoken to loads of people that have billed £1 million, and it's like, how have you got there? And there's loads of different ways. You know, so some people would say that this is the dead set way of doing it, and some people would say that's the dead set way of doing it. So again, I've learned to be open-minded, right? But I think that talking about how we started about 20 years ago, and people used to bill on average 10 to 12 grand a month then, right? And pre-pandemic, people was billing 10 to 12 grand a month, and that's where I kind of got that figure from, right? So that's why I'm thinking it's kind of like the average biller then still bills what the average biller does now. Obviously, post-pandemic, you know, them figures they're up and down and not published and whatnot. But I think what's going to happen is this is just a prediction and could completely be wrong. And again, in an hour, I could completely change my mind. But the prediction would be that actually it goes a lot more towards what it used to be like, where you are mainly on the phone, where you are mainly speaking to people and meeting people. And a lot of the computer work, which I call it, systems are updating themselves now. There is technology out there that the systems update themselves. I'm not going to be doing an hour's worth of CRM work a day. I'm probably not going to be spending an hour and a half sending out spec emails or whatever. All of that sort of stuff is taken away from the desk, right? And then it's allowing me, I much prefer relationships. I much prefer that because I feel like it's a lot easier for me to speak to friends. I like to pick up the phone, have a nice conversation with people, right? So that's my thoughts on it. Not that you asked, but you know.
Well, I think it's very similar to what I think is happening. I mean, you talked about your brother-in-law and he talked about marketing. Well, I've got a client that's installed a bit of tech that when a recruiter makes a placement, and they had a short list of maybe 2 people who went all the way down to the wire, had 3rd interviews, and one of them got the job. The second one didn't. Second one's still good. They must be good. They only just missed out. The tech will take that person's resume and search the database for clients that have hired people like that before. And then it will go out into the web and search job boards and company career sites and find companies that are hiring people like that. And then it will come back to the recruiter and say, here's 4 companies that are employing people like this guy who came second. And I know you're going to ask me a question later about business development. But this is a perfect example of the tech and the humanity working hand in hand. The tech did that, right? And did it in a few moments and isolated companies that are actually currently hiring people like this candidate. And then the good recruiter will use their influence skills to call, contact, engage, and say, hey, I know you're recruiting a person like this. I've got a candidate who's outstanding, just gone to 3rd interview stage with, you know, BHP or whatever it might be. And that's a business development call and perhaps can result in a placement, can open a door. The human being has to do that, but the tech did all the grunt work. Yeah. And those are perfect examples of where we don't want recruiters scouring through hours and hours of looking at job boards to try and find. Technology can do that, but we do want recruiters who've got the confidence, the articulation, the credibility to say, I have an outstanding candidate, even though we haven't spoken, let's have this conversation. That's, I think, where the magic is going to happen. But it is a threat. People often say to me as recruiters, I talk to them all the day long like you do too. And you're right. I believe it's a huge privilege that I'm an insider of these recruitment companies because I hear what smart people are doing in recruitment and the ideas and the mistakes they're making. So yeah, I've got 40 years experience, but I'm actually learning every day from people I work with. And I think that people say, are recruitment agencies and recruitment consultants under threat? The industry is not under threat, but individuals are. Because if you don't adapt, what you can do will no longer be valuable.
So what's your opinion on transactional recruitment versus like relationship-driven recruitment?
Well, I guess I've kind of answered it. I think transactional recruitment, by definition, has no future because it'll be transacted by machines.
So you feel like there'll be a point where the machine will be able to do the whole process?
No, not the whole process as I define it, because I think the machine will be able to do most of the process that you can write down in a manual needs to go into recruitment, like a job spec, maybe even assessing a candidate, writing an ad, posting an ad, screening candidates. But the machine won't be able to do this. Here's a candidate that I think looks perfect for the job. I approach her. I talk to her about the job. She says, Greg, it sounds okay, but I really never heard of that company. I'm not interested in it. I won't go for the interview. Thanks, don't represent me. Average recruiter won't even make that call. Slightly above average recruiter will make that call, but will go, okay, Ms. Candidate, I won't put you forward. But a good recruiter will say, hold on, before you dismiss this, let me explain why. And will sell the job in the best sense of that word, truthfully, as to why it's in her interest. And she'll say, okay, Greg, if it's that good, I'll go. She goes, she loves it, she gets the job. That is the magic. And technology can't do that. Or a client says, looks at a resume of a candidate and says, oh, there's a few things here I don't like. I won't interview that person. Right? A machine can do that. It can match the client with the candidate. And the client says, client's technology or the client themselves says no. But a great recruiter, if you have a relationship with that client, if you have credibility, will say, well, there's much more to this candidate than that's on paper. I did 3 reference checks. Outstanding. This person's so impressive in person. You read, as I used to say 30 years ago, Mr. Client, I'll stake my reputation with you on the fact that it will not be a waste of time if you see this person. So they interview them. They love them. They get the job. That is what recruitment consulting, and it's not on a job. It's not, in part of the process. And technology can never do it. So, well, I say never. As far as we can see, you can't do it. So that's where you talk about automation, you talk about transactional. Everything I've described is not transactional about what the recruiter's role is. The transactional part, more and more of it will be done by a computer, but the real value, here's another example. You go to any technology and ask them right now, what are recruitment company owners doing about work from home policy for their staff? Right? So that's what I get asked every day by my clients. Are people working from home or they're being pulled back into the office? Technology can't tell you that because ChatGPT only goes up to a year ago. Plus that information is not on the internet. So I, in this case, have insights that are valuable. And I can say to my clients, well, I've been on 16 board meetings in the last 3 months, and this is what people are doing. That's of incredible value. And every recruiter who speaks to clients, speaks to candidates every day, they have insights and knowledge that's incredibly valuable. And technology at this stage cannot replicate that. It cannot produce that value. And so, but if you don't have a relationship with the client doesn't trust you, the client just treats you as a supplier and sends you a job spec via an email and says, send me resumes, then you're completely transactional. Machine can do it better. But the client will take your advice, and you can, when I heard an example of this, Jeff. It was about, I like to say it the other day, but it was probably 4 months ago. A client, by that I mean an employer, was talking to a recruiter, and the employer was wanting to hire a finance manager. And the employer, this was in Sydney, and this has happened a bit. The employer was saying, we're 5 days a week in the office, and that's what I want for this job. Now, an average recruiter would go, oh, in their mind, that's hard. A lot of people don't want 5 days, but I'll try. This recruiter said, and I was standing behind her, she said, Mr. Client, if that is what you want, I will look for you. But if you stipulate 5 days in the office, you and I will be fishing in a very shallow talent pool. That's what she said. And then she explained, she said, the best candidates have choice. They will work 3 days in the office and 2. By the end of the conversation, the client had relented. She filled the job 2 weeks later with somebody who spent 3 days at home. That is recruitment consulting. That is the reverse of transactional. And what she advised was in the client's interest. He got a great candidate, the best he could have got. In the candidate's interest, that woman who was the candidate got a perfect job and got what she needed. And the recruiter had the self-esteem and the financial return for doing a good job. So that is where machines cannot compete.
Yeah, I think that, and I think you've done a good job there of describing the difference between transactional and relationship driven. And I don't feel like it's a million miles away from each other. I just feel like it's these little things that help to build the relationship. And I think a lot of it is confidence as well, because as you say, like a consultant could pick up that job and they look at it and they think, oh, that's what they want, and that's what they want. But that individual you spoke about had kind of like the confidence. It takes confidence to push back and say, actually, you know what? I don't think that that's in your best interest. I think you're going to get someone better if you've got this kind of criteria, and this is what we're seeing in the market and whatnot. And I think that, you know, the more confidence that grows inside of a recruiter, the better they become naturally. That's been my experience, like watching people through their career over the years, right?
Sure.
So the reason why I started this podcast was because there's loads of podcasts, and they don't make you they don't get you the inbound leads and all that sort of stuff that people promise, in my experience, right? So I knew that because, as I say, I had the benefit of going around and speaking to loads of people in the recruitment industry that already had them. But the reason why I actually wanted to do it is because I was getting quite a lot of phone calls from people who maybe they'd been in the industry for 2 or 3 years. They'd seen, quite an easy period of recruitment industry time, right? And they've been doing really well transactional because there's just been loads and loads of opportunity for people, right? That's not been the case over the last sort of year, certainly the last sort of 6 months, and who knows what's going to happen next year. So you've been giving away a lot of good tips, and the idea of this podcast is just that any recruiter out there who wants to get any better at what they're doing, this should be a platform for them to be able to come here and learn from people like yourself, not from me, from people like you, right? So with that in mind, business development has been extremely important, more so again now than it has been in recent times. So what hints and tips would you give to anyone who's struggling to win business in today's market?
Well, it's quite ironic that you asked that question because, only a few moments ago, we were talking about transactional versus consultative. Well, this goes to the heart of it.
Mm.
If ChatGPT and AI and technology is so fabulous, why don't you get it to do your BD?
Are you talking to me?
No, I'm putting that question out to the world.
Yeah.
It's ironic because you can get marketing done by technology, but you can't get sales. And that's a much
really good
smarter
point.
thing.
That's a really, really good point. Marketing can be done with technology. Sales, that's a really, really good point.
So I was just going to say to you, what I just said is actually much smarter than it sounds, and people should listen to it. Because, I gave an example, and there's thousands of examples of a very sophisticated marketing, but an actual sale converts somebody, particularly in a human-to-human environment, because we're selling jobs and we're selling people. We're not selling cars, right? We're not selling houses. We're not selling something that can be done in a transactional way. It requires sophisticated human influencing skills, as I said before. And you mentioned, you're quite right about those recruiters who did well in the post-COVID boom. And they did well because lots of jobs were pouring in the door. They became very good at matching and logistics and probably pretty good on the candidate side. But there was a massive dysfunction in their skill set because they didn't have, I heard recruiters saying things like, yeah, she's my best client. I don't need to go and see her. She loves me. She calls me every day. Well, of course, when the market turns, that client's not taking your calls anymore because you're just another recruiter on the end of the phone line. We don't know each other. We don't really have any relationship. So the first lesson about business development is get off the recruitment seesaw. And by that, I mean, 2 years ago, 18 months ago, recruiters were writing to me and calling me and saying, I'm so short of candidates. Why is it so hard to find candidates? Woe is me. And I was explaining to people that a shortage of candidates is nirvana in our industry because it means clients need us. And everything was about candidates, and no one was putting any effort into clients. And now everyone's talking about clients, and no one's putting effort into candidates. But the wheel will turn, Jeff. You've been around long enough to know that in some stage in the future, and I don't know when, it could be next year, the demand will increase and we'll be short of candidates again. So the first lesson about business development is you do business development when you have a lot of jobs, which sounds so counterintuitive, but I promise you, it's the smartest thing you're going to hear on this podcast today. I won't say of all time. So a lot of people ignore business development and client relationship building because jobs are pouring in. And we're so bad at history in this industry, we forget that the wheel will turn. So we should actually be making outbound calls, going to see people, turning a telephone call into a VC, turning a VC into a meeting or a coffee when appropriate. Don't have to do with everything, but when appropriate. And build relationships with people, because when the wheel turns, those relationships will stick. That's the first thing. So your BD when the market is good, if you start trying now, you're going to have a lot, because every recruiter in town is trying to BD now. And every client's cutting back on their recruiting expenses. So that was the worst time. I know you need the outcomes now, but you should have done it beforehand.
So what about if someone hasn't done that and they find themselves now in a situation where they've got to do business development? Have you got any kind of hints or tips for them?
Yeah, I have. I'm coming on to those. I think the first thing is we've got to try and make cold calls warm. That would be my biggest piece of advice. And I mean that in the broadest sense of the word. If you just sit down and go, right, I've got to win business. I go, there's a big company, you know, Barclays Bank. I'll call them. I'll email them. That's a very, very, very hard road to hoe. So you look for any approach that has some half-open door. So, for example, if I was sitting in a recruitment company now and it was my job to business develop, I would use the database to isolate every client we've had a job with in the last 5 years. Some of those will have good relationships and some of them will have gone dormant. Why? Well, we have a relationship, we had a relationship. That's a much easier start to contact the client and say, Mr. Client, we've dropped the ball. We've dealt with you for 3 years and we haven't for 6 months. I'm terribly sorry. We've made a mistake here. Let me get in touch. You know, better than that, but it's a reason to get in touch. So that'd be the first thing. The second thing, I'd go to ex-candidates. What about all the senior candidates we've worked with over the last 3 years who we didn't place, but came second and then we've lost track of them? We have lost track of them. Where are they now? They're probably in good jobs, in decision-making roles. AI can help you, or tech can help you isolate these people, but that's a good call. Bob, we worked with you and you had a third interview with ABC Limited. What are you doing now? Blah, blah. That person could become a candidate again, or a prospect as a client, or at the very, very worst, you've created some goodwill. I think the other thing we're not good at is, we talk about it a lot, but we're not good at in this industry, is referrals between divisions and offices. So there's plenty of companies that do temp and perm, as you know, and often we deal with client a lot on the temp side, but not on the perm side. And actually, there's a little hidden barriers between divisions, and we should work really hard. You know, if the Liverpool office has got this client, why aren't we dealing with this in London? If we deal with them in accounting, why aren't we dealing with them in marketing? Sounds obvious, but it's not well done. Another tip might be, if you do have good clients, it's strange how recruiters are not good at doing this. If you have a very good client and you build up a great relationship, ask that client for a referral. You know, Bob, I'm glad we filled this job with you again today. I've never asked you this before, but I trust you're happy with our work. Yes, Greg, of course I am. We've done a great work. Is there anyone else in your network, maybe in your company or maybe without, maybe somebody you know in the industry, who you might be prepared to refer me to? And you'll be amazed how just that there's a lot of goodwill there with a good client. They'll say, sure, yeah, I play golf with this guy. He does the same thing. He's over at ABC. May I use your name when I call him? Yes, of course you can. That's a warm call. If you call someone cold and say, I'm calling you because I spoke to Jeff and he asked me to give you a call, that conversation is going to go differently to, hey, I'm Greg the recruiter. Can I have some jobs? So previous placements, you know, any placements you've made, you can follow them up. Where are they? They may have moved on. And of course, building a brand on social media, you know, Jeff, you and I don't know each other, right? But you've contacted me. Why have you done that? You've done it because you've seen me on social media. So you've engaged with me because of my brand. Yeah. A brand's a big word, you know, because of my content is probably a better word. And recruiters can do that in their niche, and they should. So if you have, you know, it's about doing the things that you should do before you need them. You've got to, when it comes to business development and recruiting generally, you've got to fix the hole in the roof before the rain comes, right? And that means building the relationships, building the brand so that when the tough times come, you've got resources. Reverse marketing, I don't know what you call it, you know, speccing candidates in. That is as old as the recruiting hills. It's still a wonderfully effective technique. If you're working in digital marketing, you've got a great UX designer, and you know these 5 companies hire people like that, calling them with a quality candidate, obviously you get the person's permission, is going to open doors. So those are just 5 or 6 ideas, which are built on the premise of try not to make it cold. Try to make it, if you've got nothing, try to make it have some leverage point. You know, if you can go through a half-open door, it's much better than trying to burst through a locked door. And that's the analogy that I think is helpful in business development, because if you're just, and you know, owners of recruitment companies have flipped from candidates can, and they're now saying to their recruiters, you must do business development. Recruiters got 6 months, a year, 2 years experience. They've never done it. They are not going to succeed just being told to make 100 calls or go on meetings. They need tools. They need training. They need to be shown how to do these things, and slowly they'll have success.
Okay, well, that's really reassuring to hear, because a lot of the points that you've brought up there are stuff that we've covered specifically in previous podcasts. So we had Sean Anderson on, who was talking about personal branding and how you can create yourself a brand of recognition. People start coming to you, or at least when you go out to them, they know who you are, and it makes it so much better. We've had
he's right. He's absolutely right. I know that guy. And he's very good at that.
He's extremely good, yeah.
And the thing about it is, though, Jeff, is it takes hard work and consistency with no returns in the short term. And in our industry, and I'm guilty of this, we're a very short-term industry. There's no one in the world who has said more often than me, how many placements have you made this month? There would be very few people in the world who've said that more than me. But I've learned over time that we need to invest in the future with things like business development, and certainly with brand building. I put out a blog a week and have done for 15 years.
Wow.
I post on LinkedIn. I'm actually off LinkedIn at the moment because I'm taking a break, because I get my brand has worked so well. I get 25 questions a day from somewhere in the world, honestly. So it's a privilege, and I'm very honored, but it's hard work actually keeping up with it. So you got to work at it, and you don't see the return in the short term. But as Sean said, you will get inbound inquiries. You contacted me, clients contact me from all over the world. I was in the UK recently and doing some speeches. 1,000 recruiters came. I'm a 65-year-old unemployed ex-recruiter from Australia. Why would they turn up and pay £250 to come? That's what happened, right? And it happened because of brand building over years and years and years, and providing value. And that's what a recruiter needs to do in their segment. Now, that's not going to solve the problem. You said if someone's got no jobs now, but the thing is, when the market picks up, don't get off the seesaw and start doing the counterintuitive things. When you've got lots of jobs, still work on building your brand. And by the way, building your brand works for candidates and clients, so it's always useful.
Yeah. So, okay, so look, 1,000 people come to see you in London. Thousands of people all around the world have benefited from your experience and your training. Previously, we was talking about having the right infrastructure and coaching, having the right people in the business. So in regards to billing managers, billing managers arguably have the toughest job in the industry. So what is the most useful piece of advice you have for these recruitment heroes? It's hard to call them anything else.
I agree with you. I would actually say it is most definitely the hardest job in recruitment, without any question. I did it. I was also a CEO of like $100 million recruitment company, and people say, you still think that being a billing manager is harder than that? Much harder than that. Because if you're a CEO, it's a tough job, and a lot rests on it. But you can dictate your time. You can say, I will not speak to anyone this morning. I'm in a meeting. If you're a billing manager, you've actually got a client on the phone giving you an offer, a candidate bombing out, and one of your recruiters in the corner crying because someone was rude to her. That's the life of a billing manager. It's just stuff happening. So it is the hardest job in recruitment. It's also the most rewarding when it goes well. But the first thing I'd say is this, Jeff. As usual, I answer your questions by saying we've got to have done the pre-work. Don't take on a role as a billing manager unless you are clear that you are up for what is a different job, right? So again, my analogy, the best goal scorer doesn't make the best captain or manager. A lot of people who manage top football teams weren't the best players themselves. A lot of people who coach the best tennis players in the world never won a Grand Slam in their lives. They know the sport. They're good at it, but what they're good at is coaching. And so to make the assumption that the best recruiter is going to be the best manager is a huge flaw, and it's actually fucked up a lot of people's careers, to be honest with you, because you've got to actually sit back and understand that there's two career paths, broadly speaking, in recruitment. Being the world's greatest recruiter and enjoying the benefits of high billings, great relationships, repeat business, all your work exclusive, high income, or leading recruiters they are totally different skills. The best player can become the best manager, but it's not necessarily true. So you've got to ask yourself, and I've asked a million people in recruitment this, are you happy to have a job where your success is determined by the success of other people? And most big billers go, no, I want to have my name top of the leaderboard. I love that. I can control that. Because if you're going to be a billing manager, you have to be good at billing, yes, but you have to be good at all the things that make other people successful. And so you've got to understand that. The second or third, wherever I'm up to, tip I'd give a billing manager is don't be disheartened. If that's the road you're on, you can get better. It's not though anyone woke up in the morning and just became a great leader. Sometimes we think of the captain of the head boy at school, or Nelson Mandela, or the captain of the, rugby team. They're natural leaders. And some people are more natural than others, but mostly leading and managing is a skill you can improve on if you work at it. The other tip I'd give anyone who's a leader in recruitment is leadership is action, right? It's what you do that counts. Look at me, I'm a good talker, right? I can talk, and I used that when I was a leader in recruitment. But in the end, people judge you by what you do. The quiet words you had to help train somebody. The support you gave somebody, whether you're consistent with your messaging and you actually act on what you say. So many people preach a good game, don't actually play a good game. So authenticity is important. And I would also say that the hallmark of a great leader, when I say great, that can just be a team leader of two people, is you've got to be brave. You've got to do the right thing, not do what's popular. And man, our industry is full of people who do what they think is going to make them popular. I've been managing recruiters for most of my life, and no one has ever stopped me in the street and said, Greg, I remember the day you gave us beer and donuts on a Friday. I love that. No one has ever said that. But people do occasionally stop me, and I don't even remember who they are, and they say, you gave me a talking to, and I really hated it, but it was the best advice I've ever got. And I'm quite sure when I did that, I was nervous, and no one wants confrontation, but it's doing difficult things. Final thing, and this is probably the most practical thing. If you want to be a great billing manager, there are only 3 things that you should spend 80% of your time on. And I mean it. There's a million things you can spend your time on. There's 3 things. Number 1, selling. You're still selling. Now that might be billing, it might be account management, or it might be out seeing clients with recruiters. You're still selling. When a billing manager becomes a backroom person poring over spreadsheets, it's the beginning of the end. You're always selling. Second thing is you're a coach. And coaching is not training. Training's great. Coaching is on-the-job feedback. Well done. I love the way you sold that temp job to that person. That was a great line. Can you tell the rest of the team that this afternoon? Because that's good. Or maybe it's coaching is correction of things done badly and affirmation of things done well. And that's very hard to do if everyone's working remotely, right? So number 1, selling. Number 2, number 1, selling. Number 1, equal coaching. They're the 2 most important things. And the third thing is performance management. And performance management means taking an underperformer to make them at least good, and taking a good recruiter and helping her become great. And that means doing difficult things like actually measuring what people do, giving them feedback on their activity. So the biggest tip I can give to a billing manager is you can get better, be brave, and focus on 3 things. You always should be selling, coaching, or performance managing 80% of the time. And I mean that. And 20% of the time is on everything else.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that practical advice. That's really, really helpful. So, so you're sat in a billing manager's role. You've got 2 or 3 people underneath you. You're new to the game. The points are you need to make sure that you're still continuing to bill and you're leading from the front and you're selling, right? The coaching side of things is more about correcting. What terminology did you use? Sorry.
Well, it's broadly speaking, it's correcting shortfalls in behavior, competencies, or skills. And that might be as simple as, I'll give you an example. And this is why you've got to hear things. Someone has an offer turned down. But the time that people learn, Jeff, is in the moment of despair or the moment of ecstasy. So the best time to train someone is when things have just gone wrong. or when things have just gone well. And that means reaffirming what they've done well. Having a training session next Tuesday on a counteroffer being turned down is good. It's better than not doing it. But right now, when they're feeling the pain, Mary, bad luck, that offer was turned down. When she said this, what did you say? What did she say when you said that? And maybe other people are listening in. I do it in public. Never humiliate. Never. People don't learn when you're embarrassing them, and that's just not a good thing at all. But it's positive conversation about how can we do it better. They're never going to listen more than when they've just had an offer turned down or a temp bomber. So it's like, what could we have done differently? What do you think? And someone else chips in. Yeah, that's a good idea. And so that learning is so powerful. It only takes you 30 seconds or 2 minutes. But also the person goes away feeling supported. And the next time it happens, they will remember that. And that is the power of a good recruitment leader. That is where being a billing manager is leverage, right? Yes, we know you can bill. That's why you got the job. And you've still got to bill. But you've got to allocate time toward coaching and performance management. You've literally got to allocate time. You just got to say to yourself, if you're a billing manager and you say to yourself, it's 3 days since I really had a conversation with Mary. I saw her a couple of times. We said hello. I spoke to her on the phone. But how is she actually going? And you need to say, Mary, let's have a coffee. Or Mary, let's have a VC tomorrow. And the conversation is, how's it going? Oh, my numbers are good. Yeah, but how's it going? You seem to have lost a bit of anything on your mind, and out it all comes. Now, most leaders don't do that. They gloss over it, or they don't even see it. They don't look for it. You've got to look for it. You're not looking for problems, but you're looking for opportunities to help people get better or protect them and give them defenses when things are going badly.
Okay, and so the last part of the puzzle was performance reviews, right? So
performance management. So what that is. Okay, let me hit the elephant in the room. It is laughable that people deride KPIs. The problem with KPIs is not the concept of measurement. And there's no one who's good at anything in this world who doesn't measure what they do. Trust me. Because how can you get better unless you know where you are? How can you get better? If you're a cricketer, surely you want to know that you're always going up or playing outside the off stump. That will allow you to stop doing that. Right? Or if you're a bowler, surely you want to know that this batsman loves to hit the ball over cover. So don't let him do that. Now, I know these might be analogies that don't mean anything to a lot of people, but it's all about measurement, right? And the reason that KPIs have a bad name in recruitment is the way that they are so badly delivered by leadership. That's the problem. It's like, do 100 of these. Oh, you're doing 98. Do 100 more. That's not respectful to a person. Forget the word KPI. Call them your benchmarks or your dashboard or your activity plan. Call them whatever you like. But, again, another sporting analogy, if a person's job in a football team is to score goals, the one thing they have to do, Jeff, is take shots on goal. So if someone's not scoring any goals, what's your advice? Score goals? That's not very helpful. It's like, okay, we've analyzed it. You, in the last 3 games, are averaging 1 shot on goal. You need to lift that to 5, mate. And then once he's lifted it or she's lifted it to 5 shots on goal a game, let's look at the quality of those goals. You took 5 shots, well done, but they're all hitting the corner flag. So we need better quality. And that's exactly an analogy that fits with recruitment. Are we doing enough stuff? And those things are the things we know: interviewing candidates, resumes out, interviews, meeting clients, taking jobs. They are the shots on goal. But then it's the quality of those shots. But what are we doing in the interview? Are we all things that are the nuance of the job? And so that is the real power behind performance management. And that's where you can have an impact on someone's life. And I mean that, not dramatically. And I'm not trying to over dramatize it, but you can help someone go from teetering on leaving the industry to making it and then having a 20-year career. That is the impact you can have. Yeah. There's a woman that used to work for me many, many years ago, and I put her on my 90-day plan, which is all of this. And she was not happy with me. And it was, she had to phone every night and leave a message on my voicemail with how many interviews, and I coached her and she turned around and she became an outstanding recruiter. And 5 years later, we started a business together. I was one of 4 of them. I didn't do any of the work. They did the work. That business turns over $120 million now. She's a 1/3 shareholder. So thank you very much, I would think, in terms of, I look back at that and say, I played some small part because she was this close to leaving the industry and going back to being an accountant. But through quality performance management and her determination and her desire, that she was given a plan, and she went from being a failing recruiter to a good recruiter, and she's actually on the point of retiring in her 60s now. She's had a wonderful career and made a great living out of it. I'm not taking any credit for that, but it's all part of the responsibility of a billing manager. Your job is to take underperformers to good and good to great. Along the way, some will be managed out because they weren't right, but give them every opportunity to succeed. That's what the real job of a billing manager is, plus selling and coaching, of course.
And hence why it's the hardest part of the game, isn't it? It really is. Yeah.
It really is a tough job. I was going to say it's a thankless job. It's not thankless. Most people won't thank you at the time, but some years later they might. But you don't do it for the thanks, right? You do it. And it's not as though you have to be altruistic. I mean, you want people to succeed, but your success is predicated on their success. So it's a very hard thing. Most great recruiters are loners in a way. They've got friends, but they like to be top of the leaderboard. They like to see the high billings. They get the affirmation from that. And I was a good recruiter, Jeff, not a great one. Every company I worked in, there were many, many better recruiters than me. But after 5 years, I would have jumped off the Harbour Bridge rather than interview another candidate. I got much more fun out of helping other recruiters be successful. And I was better at that. And if I'd stayed a pure recruiter, I would not have stayed in recruitment. I just couldn't have lasted it, to be honest.
That's a really interesting point, because I speak to a lot of people who are sort of at the avenue, right? So they've been doing well, they've been in quite a lot of money, and they're having the conversations with their director about, do they move into like a billing management role or a principal consultant role, right? Which are the 2 main areas that you can go in this game, isn't it, right? And on the other hand, I speak to a lot of people who maybe haven't billed well, but when I've spoken to them and I've really drilled into themselves and what they're good at outside of work, and that, just some of the softer stuff as well, I feel like you haven't billed loads, but you'd be a great billing manager. Your benefit to this industry would be in a manager's role. It's not always the best billers that become the best managers, like what you were saying about right. So I think it's quite a personal thing, right? Whether you're going to go down which route. But would you say that there was some characteristics? So let's just say, for instance, you're talking about that person who, I know it was like a fictitious person, but that person who needs to be at the top, they're really, really good at billing, they're a great 360 consultant, right? Someone's asking them now maybe go down a billing management route, because what I try and do is I try and speak to people not just about the role that they may be going into, but where are we trying to get to? What's the end game here? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to build your own business 5-10 years down the line? Are you more interested in the kind of like entrepreneur route where you're going to build really well within a business, etc.? Some people don't want to be on desk forever. Some people love it and want to be on desk forever, right? So we have those conversations about what's next and why it's next, because a lot of people believe that they must go to that billing manager's role if they're going to exit and then start their own business, because if they've not learned how to train staff, then they'll fail. Have you got any thoughts around that, Greg?
Well, they are right that if you're going to build a business, the core competency isn't recruitment. The core competency is leadership and ability to scale the business. And that most people don't have that ability. And that's why 80% of recruitment companies in the world have less than 10 staff. And the vast majority of recruitment companies in the UK have billings of less than £1 million a year. Companies. Right? There's a lot of small recruitment companies. But you've got to go right back to the beginning. My advice to somebody is you've got to decide whether you have the competency and the desire to manage people. And you can get better at it, but are you going to have fun doing that? Because there's no point embarking on a career which is for years if the core responsibility of that job is unappealing to you. And that means the things we've spoken about before. Will you get fun out of training and mentoring and coaching and helping? You know, the real success of a billing manager is when he or she surrounds herself with people who are better recruiters than them. And I was good at that. I reckon I've had hundreds of people working in my companies who are far better recruiters than me. And I would never be as good as them. Right? But that to me is success. Right? And I revel in it, and I'm glad they're better than me. And because that's the dynamic. And if they're not better than me because of me, they were always going to be better in the right environment with the right training. And I got my fun from that and my financial return. So it's perfect. In my book that you mentioned earlier, there's the story of the best recruiter I've ever known, and his name is Graham Whelan. He's a good friend of mine. He's recently retired. He's a recruiter for 45 years. The best recruiter I've ever known, and I spell out in the book why. And we started a company together, and that company grew significantly, it was listed on the stock exchange eventually. And he did manage offices for a while, and he did a fine job. But he gravitated back to just being a recruiter because he loved, to his last day, candidates and clients. I used to go to lunch with him, and he was in his 60s, and he's now in his late 60s. And he'd come late, a few minutes late, because he'd been interviewing a candidate, and he was enthusiastic, and he couldn't stop talking about this candidate. He's 65 years old, and I'm like, you're still excited by that. Mm. And he just loved people and placements and advice. And that guy, and I'm not exaggerating, he could walk into any boardroom in Sydney and Melbourne. He was placing accounting people. If he walked in, half of them would get up and throw their arms around him. I'm not joking, because he placed them, sometimes several times, and in many cases, he placed their children in jobs. He'd given them advice, he'd supported them when they got retrenched. Now that, and if you look at his career and you look at mine, you say, who's made more impact? He's a recruiter, and he was till the very end. I think he's had far more impact, even though I might have had the big jobs and all that. And he followed that path, and he was brilliant at it. And he didn't like managing people and performance management. I mean, he certainly coached and helped and supported and collaborated, but sitting down in a board meeting talking about KPIs, that wasn't his thing. Whereas me, I enjoyed helping people turn from average recruiters to great if I could help. So I know I've answered your question in a roundabout way, but you've got to work out whether that's your path. Because honestly, if you go and start a company and try and grow it and you don't have leadership skills, you will always go from 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 people and drop back to 2. And you've seen that before.
Loads of times.
And because they don't have the ability to scale and to build a second tier of management. And in that case, you either work for somebody else and build a huge amount, or become a bedroom warrior and just work for yourself, maybe with one offsider, build a lot, make a lot of money, have self-actualization, enjoy what you do. You won't build an asset that you can sell, but you've got to remember that's a completely different journey to build a company that has value, and you have to have completely different skills. So the smartest thing to do is to work out where you get your fun and what raw competencies you have, and then follow that path.
Okay, well, I think that's sound advice, and it makes me feel a lot better about myself, because I think that, you know, that's the core of the conversation I usually have with people naturally when I get asked that question. But I thought I'd run it by you while I've got you, right? And I know I've not got you for much longer, so I've got a couple of quick fire questions, if you don't mind. You might be able to answer these directly, you may not, but you mentioned a few times about hundreds of recruiters that have been excellent, and, you know, I know that if there's anyone that can answer this honestly, it's yourself. So in your experience, what do all successful recruitment consultants have in common?
Well, again, people, and maybe you're hoping for this, would like a nice pithy answer, or
I would love
got to have this one holy grail. I would say this: they got to have influencing skills, resilience, recruiter equity, which means, maybe we spend a minute on this. Most clients give recruiters the problem, and the problem is, find me a staff member. equity means a share, right? But they don't give them a share of the solution. If a client gives you a job in competition with 4 agencies, they're giving you the problem. They're not helping you. They're not allowing you into the tent to share in the solution. They're not taking your advice. They don't return your calls. So great recruiters always have equity. So they do give clients advice. They do provide insights. They do take jobs exclusively. They sell retainers. They have credibility. Recruiters have courage. And also, I've noticed that recruiters who really last the long term, not the shooting stars who might do well for a few years, they never forget that they're dealing with people. And while they're competitive and they have sales ability, they don't cross the line where they stop acting in the interests of their candidates and clients. And that is not just PR. That is my true belief. Because one of the things about the great recruiter is that they would guard their reputation. The final thing, and this is perhaps the most important, every great recruiter understands, even if they couldn't articulate it as I'm about to, they understand the secret formula to recruiting success. So I'll tell you, Jeff, so you can share it with all your, is it 5 or 6 million podcast listeners? The secret to success is activity times quality times target market. I'll explain it. Great recruiters always do high levels of activity. And that's why things like measurement and KPIs are very important. But they either do it because they've been trained that way, managed that way, or it's intuitive. High levels of activity. If you want the sporting analogy, and you probably don't, lots of shots on goal. You will not succeed in recruitment unless you do high levels of activity. That is, in my opinion, a sacred truth. If you're trying to take shortcuts and do the bare minimum, you might hit the goal occasionally, but if you want to hit the goal often, you have to take a lot of shots on goal. So activity. But the second thing is, the activity has to be of a high quality. So your quality of your interviews has to be high, not a 10-minute phone screen. The quality of the taking of a job order, the matching, the briefing of a client before they interview candidates, the briefing of a candidate, the debrief, the countering the counter offer. All those are high. You're doing high levels of activity, but you're doing high levels of quality. And the final thing is, even if you're doing high activity, even if you're doing high quality, you're still not going to succeed unless you're doing it with the right people. So I might say, here's Jeff. He's doing 10 candidate interviews a week. High activity. Good on you, Jeff. I've sat in on his interviews. The quality is magnificent. So you've got A, activity, Q, quality, but he's interviewing the wrong candidates. He's interviewing candidates that our clients aren't hiring, right? Or Jeff's doing 10 client visits a week. They're high quality, but he's not seeing the decision maker. He's not seeing companies who are hiring in our niche, right? So high activity, shots on goal. High quality, get them in the top right-hand corner, not hitting the corner flag. And then finally, do it with the right people. All great recruiters, even though they may not be able to say what I've just said in the last 3 minutes, they understand and do those things. And that's the key to recruiting success.
And I think as well, they feed each other, don't they? Because the more you do things, the better you become at it, right? So, you know, the activity gets higher, and then all of a sudden the quality, you know, as long as you know what quality is and what you're trying to get.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And your ratios improve. So if you're doing, let's say you're doing, your activity is you're getting 5 client candidates interviews a week. 5 of your candidates.
So would you mind to lay that? Would you mind to lay it out like as you actually would if you're talking like for like a recruitment, like a perm recruitment desk? Like how many would you say you'd need to speak to 20 clients or 20 candidates?
No, I can't do that because it completely varies. I mean, it's hugely different doing perm recruitment for hospitality staff in Birmingham than it's financial accountants in Sydney, isn't it? Okay. So, you know, it's got to be tailored. I can't give, you know, the owner of or the manager of the recruitment company should know what good looks like. But it's not only activity in terms of, this is the point I was going to make. You would know this. There's one recruiter who gets, well, here's a great example. What's the fill ratio of jobs taken to jobs filled in the UK in recruitment? Do you know what it is? What's the average?
I don't know.
I'll tell you what it is. 1 in 5.
Okay.
So you think about that. People are filling 20% of the jobs they're taking. What other profession in the world do you know where is it acceptable to only be successful 20% of the time? Would you like to go to a brain surgeon with that history? Our industry is deeply dysfunctional. Now, somebody is filling 1 job out of 5. So you could take your raw stats and say, hey, here's Jeff. He's taking 10 jobs a month. here's Greg, he's taking 10 jobs a month. They're equal. No, Jeff's filling 8 out of 10 and Greg's filling 1 out of 10. So it's activity, but it's quality, right? And Jeff's obviously much better at all the matching and the quality of the job order, etc. So what do? Well, you get incremental gains with Jeff. You say, Jeff, you're taking 10 and you're filling 8. Let's try and lift it to 9, but let's also try and lift it to 12. 9 out of 10, I mean. But let's lift it to 12 because then you'll fill 11 out of 12. Greg, you don't need any more jobs, mate. You just need to be better at the process and go from 1 out of 10 to 3 out of 10. So if I went from 1 out of 10 to 3 out of 10, I'm getting 3 times as better, or more billings, and no more work, just better at it. So that formula of activity times quality times target market, as you said, once you follow that and think about it and get better at it, you actually have to do less activity for a better outcome. And then you can raise your billings by doing better activity, more activity with the same ratio. So that applies to jobs taken, candidates interviewed, resumes out. And that's why it frustrates me when really ill-informed people say that measurement and KPIs is old-fashioned. If you want to be good at something, you have to know where you are now before you can get better. So what is the point of saying to somebody who fills 1 job out of 10, get more jobs? What is the thinking in leadership that says you're filling 1 job out of 10? The way to get more billings, mate, is to get 20 jobs. Then you'll fill 2 out of 20. That's the way to send somebody out of the industry. If somebody's filling 1 job out of 10, you've got to dig into what's the quality and how do we get it to 1 out of 5, and then 1 out of 4, and then 3 out of 5. You know, obviously that's the quality thing. So yeah, I am quite passionate about it because you see people pulling the bluntest of levers, right? You want to do more placements, just take more jobs. Well, why don't you fill a higher percentage of the jobs first? That would be the smarter thing to do.
For sure. And you mentioned KPIs quite a lot. You know, obviously in the industry, I think it's what your experience of KPIs have been. I was really lucky. I was shown, you know, their key performance indicators. If you want to get to here, this is what you need to do. And I looked at them kind of like a friend. It was like a guideline. Okay, so long as I'm doing these things, I should be all right. And that I've used that in my life. As long as I'm doing the right things, usually I get the right outcomes over a period of time. So yeah, I mean, I suppose we could probably talk for ages about KPIs, but I'm conscious of your time, and you know.
Yeah, well, we can do a quick. If people go to my website, which is gregsavage.com.au, there is let me just look at it. There's a tab called free ebooks and videos, and there is an ebook there. It's 30 pages long on this whole topic of KPIs, performance management. Dump the word KPIs if you don't like it. Just think of benchmarks or a dashboard or an improvement process. And it all starts from the belief that you can't manage what you don't measure. When I say that people in the UK, in Australia, it's 1 out of 4, in the UK, it's 1 out of 5. Well, if you don't know that, how can you get better? And that just leads leadership to do the dumbest thing, which is to say to people, do more stuff. We've got to have high activity, but go back to the formula of high quality with the right people. That's the smart way to approach it.
Okay, well, look, thank you very, very much. I appreciate all your time and effort. I think it's been excellent. Anyone listening, I'm sure they've got lots out of this. Is there anything that you'd like to add or like me to ask before we end it?
Oh, well, no, I would just remind people as we go through, the slower period that, first of all, while it's slower, we're not in a recession. There's basically underlying skill shortages in both the UK and Australia, and hiring still happening. UK industry is worth £43 billion a year. It's huge, and we might go through a slowdown, and then I'm sure at some point the cycle will pick up. So take a long-term view. Yes, it's tougher now, and you've got to do things like business development. But as the market recovers, get off the seesaw. Don't dump clients and focus only on candidates and then do the reverse. We're always going to need both. Just take a long-term view and, strive to get better at that formula that I talked about, because there comes a tipping point in our industry where you work so hard, you've had some success, but in the end, unless you get good at it, the rewards don't outweigh the negatives. You've got to be good enough that the good things that happen in recruitment, placements, positive feedback, referrals, recommendations, affirmation, that the amount of that overshines the negatives, which will always happen. You're always going to have offers turned down and bad things happen. Problem is, a lot of people get far more negatives than positives because they work in an environment which is all about numbers and not about quality. So we need to always look at improving. So we reach the tipping point. And then recruitment becomes a brilliant profession, a lot of fun, a lot of financial return, and really worth being in. It's the one industry. I shouldn't say what I'm about to say. I really shouldn't. But if you're an average accountant or an average teacher, maybe no one ever knows. But if you're an average recruiter, everyone knows, but especially you, because you are putting up with relentless failure, filling one job out of 5. You have to change that dynamic.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time, Greg. We do a lot of stuff in the US as well, so a lot of this stuff is going to go out to the American market, and all of the same rules apply because they're universal stuff that you've said, and so thank you very much for everything. Merry Christmas, everybody. Merry Christmas to you, Greg, on the beach, wherever you're going to be, and Merry Christmas to everyone listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. We done, mate?